I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. I need you to know that I'm not a saint. I'm not perfect. And when my sister showed up at my door 3 years after she married my ex-fiance, bruised and begging for help, my first instinct wasn't compassion. It was satisfaction. That ugly, twisted feeling that whispered, "Good, now you know how it feels." I'm not proud of that feeling, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't there. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, because you need to understand how we got here, to understand why that moment, standing in my doorway looking at my sister's battered face, was so impossibly complicated. My name is Naomi Williams, and I'm 34 years old. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I work as a graphic designer for a small but successful marketing firm. I have a decent apartment in a good neighborhood, a circle of close friends, and a life I've worked hard to rebuild. But 3 years ago, I had something different. I had Trevor, and I had a sister I trusted. Trevor and I met when I was 27. He was everything I thought I wanted: charming, successful, attentive. He was an investment banker, always dressed perfectly, always knew the right thing to say. We dated for 3 years before he proposed, and I said yes without hesitation. I thought I knew him. I thought I knew what our future would look like. I was wrong about both things. My sister Zoe is 3 years younger than me. Growing up, we were close, or at least I thought we were. She was the baby of the family, beautiful and vivacious in a way I never was. Where I was quiet and thoughtful, she was loud and spontaneous. Where I planned everything, she flew by the seat of her pants. Our mother used to say we balanced each other out. What she didn't say, what maybe none of us wanted to acknowledge, was that there had always been competition between us. Subtle, unspoken, but there. When I introduced Zoe to Trevor 6 months into our relationship, I didn't think twice about it. Why would I? She was my sister. He was my boyfriend. Family dinners, holiday gatherings, birthday parties, it all seemed so normal, so innocent. Looking back, I can see the signs I missed. The way Trevor's eyes would linger on Zoe just a beat too long. The way she'd laugh at his jokes with just a little too much enthusiasm. The way they'd both go quiet when I entered a room where they'd been talking alone. But I didn't see it then. I was busy planning a wedding, busy with my career, busy living the life I thought I was building. I was blind, and maybe I wanted to be blind. Maybe some part of me knew that if I looked too closely, I'd see something I couldn't unsee. The truth came out 6 weeks before our wedding. 6 weeks! I'd already sent out the invitations. We'd booked the venue, hired the caterer, ordered the flowers. My dress was hanging in my closet, wrapped in protective plastic, waiting for the day I'd become Mrs. Trevor Hayes. Everything was perfect, exactly as I'd planned. I came home early from work one Tuesday afternoon. I'd been feeling sick all morning, and my boss had sent me home to rest. I unlocked the door to the apartment Trevor and I shared, calling out his name as I walked in. He wasn't supposed to be home. He told me he had back-to-back meetings all day. But his car was in the parking lot, and I could hear voices coming from our bedroom. I'll never forget the walk down that hallway. My heart was pounding, my stomach churning with something that wasn't just illness. I pushed open the bedroom door, and there they were. My fiancé, my sister, in my bed, in the bed where I slept every night, where I dreamed about my future, where I felt safe and loved and chosen. They scrambled apart when they saw me, but it was too late. I'd seen everything I needed to see. Zoe grabbed for her clothes, her face flushed, not with shame, I realized, but with something that looked almost like defiance. Trevor started talking immediately, words tumbling over each other in his rush to explain, to justify, to make this into something other than what it was. "Naomi, wait, this isn't what it looks like." But we all knew that was a lie. It was exactly what it looked like. "How long?" I heard myself ask. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from somewhere outside my body. They looked at each other, and in that look I saw everything. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a relationship, a choice they'd been making over and over again while I planned a wedding to a man who was already in love with someone else. "Get out," I said quietly, then louder. "Get out! Both of you, get out of my apartment right now!" Zoe grabbed her things and rushed past me, not meeting my eyes. Trevor tried to talk to me, tried to explain again, but I couldn't hear it. I couldn't stand there in my bedroom, our bedroom, and listen to him tell me why he'd chosen my sister over me. So I screamed until he left, and then I collapsed on the floor and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. That was 3 years ago. 3 years since the day my sister and my fiancé destroyed my life and didn't even have the decency to pretend they felt bad about it. The days after I found them together blur into a painful haze in my memory. I called off the wedding, obviously. That was the easy part, or at least the most straightforward part. I sent out emails to everyone on the guest list, returned gifts, canceled vendors. Some of them were understanding. Others seemed almost disappointed, like they'd been looking forward to the drama of a wedding that everyone would know was doomed. My mother was devastated, but not in the way I needed her to be. She cried, yes. She said she was sorry, yes. But she also kept saying things like, "These things happen, and maybe it's for the best," and the one that hurt the most, "I'm sure Zoe didn't mean to hurt you." Didn't mean to hurt me? How do you accidentally sleep with your sister's fiancé for 3 months? How do you accidentally destroy your sister's wedding, her future, her trust? But that was always how it had been with Zoe. She got away with things because she was the baby, because she was charming, because somehow her mistakes were always framed as unfortunate accidents rather than deliberate choices. And I'd always been the understanding older sister, the one who was supposed to be mature enough to forgive, to move on, to not make a big deal out of things. Well, I wasn't feeling very understanding anymore. I moved out of the apartment Trevor and I had shared. I couldn't stay there, couldn't sleep in that bed, couldn't walk through those rooms without seeing them together. My best friend Lauren helped me pack up my things and move into a small one-bedroom across town. It wasn't as nice, and the rent was higher than I could comfortably afford on my own, but it was mine. Trevor's name wasn't on the lease. Zoe had never set foot in it. It was a clean slate, and I needed that more than I needed granite countertops or a view of the park. Lauren was amazing through all of it. She showed up every day, sometimes just to sit with me while I cried, sometimes to force me to eat or shower or leave the apartment. She listened to me rage and grieve and question everything I'd ever believed about love and family and trust. She never once said I was overreacting or that I needed to forgive and move on. She just let me feel what I was feeling. "They're garbage people," she said one night about 2 weeks after the breakup. We were sitting on my new couch, eating ice cream straight from the carton, and I'd just finished crying over some random memory of Trevor. "Absolute garbage. And I know you loved him, Naomi, but you deserve so much better than someone who would do that to you. And your sister, she's worse than him. At least he didn't share your DNA." I know this sounds crazy, but hey, we're all just here trying to figure life out, right? So before we go any further, I want to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or state in the comments. Are you at home, on your lunch break? Maybe you're supposed to be doing something else right now, but you just can't stop watching. I see you, I appreciate you, and I need you to buckle up because this story is about to get a whole lot more complicated. Now, back to what happened next. I started therapy about a month after the breakup. I'd never been to therapy before, had always thought it was something other people needed, but not me. I was strong, I was together, I could handle my own problems. But this wasn't something I could handle on my own, and Lauren finally convinced me to at least try it. Dr. Diane became my lifeline. She was a Black woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense approach that I desperately needed. She didn't let me wallow, but she also didn't push me to forgive before I was ready. She helped me understand that what happened wasn't just about losing Trevor, it was about losing my sister, my sense of family, my ability to trust my own judgment. You're grieving multiple losses simultaneously, Naomi. You lost your partner, your future as you had envisioned it, your relationship with your sister, and your sense of safety within your family system. That's not something you just bounce back from, Naomi. That's trauma, Naomi, and it's going to take time to heal. Time. Everyone kept talking about time. Time heals all wounds. Give it time. You'll feel better with time. But time wasn't doing anything except making me angrier. Because while I was trying to heal, trying to rebuild my life, trying to figure out how to trust anyone ever again, Trevor and Zoe were moving forward with their relationship like nothing was wrong. I found out they were living together about 2 months after the breakup. My mother mentioned it casually over the phone, like it was telling me about the weather. Zoe moved into Trevor's new place. It's actually quite nice, dear. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors throughout. I hung up on her. I couldn't listen to my mother describe my ex-fiance's apartment where he was living with my sister like it was some kind of real estate review. Did she not understand what she was doing? Did she not see how every casual mention of them together was like a knife in my chest? That's when I made the decision to cut them out of my life completely. Not just Trevor. I'd already deleted his number, blocked him on social media, returned everything he'd left at my place. But Zoe, too. And my mother, at least for a while, because I couldn't trust her not to try to push us back together in the name of family unity. Dr. Diane supported this decision. You have every right to protect yourself. Forgiveness is important, but it can't be forced, and it definitely can't happen while the people who hurt you are actively choosing each other over your well-being. Creating boundaries isn't about punishment, it's about survival. So I survived. I threw myself into my work, took on extra projects, worked late nights to avoid going home to my empty apartment. I started running in the mornings, pushing my body until it hurt too much to think about anything else. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my relationship with Trevor. I went on a few dates, though none of them went anywhere because I couldn't trust my own judgment anymore. How could I trust anyone when I'd been so completely wrong about the 2 people I'd trusted most? About 6 months after the breakup, I heard through the grapevine, a mutual friend who didn't know any better than to tell me, that Trevor and Zoe were engaged. Engaged! 6 months after he'd been engaged to me, 6 months after I had found them in my bed, they were getting married, and apparently it was going to be a big wedding, white dress, fancy venue, the whole thing that I'd been planning with him. I cried for 3 days straight. Then I got angry. Then I made a decision. I was going to be fine. Better than fine. I was going to build a life so good, so full, so completely mine that what they'd done to me would eventually become just a footnote in my story rather than the defining chapter. It took another 6 months, but I started to believe I could actually do it. I got a promotion at work, I moved into a better apartment, I started dating someone new, a guy named Marcus who seemed kind and patient and genuinely interested in getting to know me rather than just wanting something from me. It didn't work out long term, but it proved to me that I could trust someone again, at least a little bit. I even started talking to my mother again, though I made it clear that Zoe was off limits as a topic of conversation. If she brought up my sister, I ended the call. It took a few tries, but she eventually learned. The wedding happened about a year after they got engaged. I didn't go, obviously. I didn't even think about going, but I knew when it was happening because my mother casually mentioned she'd be out of town that weekend, and I'd seen enough Facebook posts from people I'd forgotten to unfriend to know the date. I spent that entire Saturday at a spa with Lauren. We got massages, facials, manicures, pedicures, the works. We drank champagne and pretended it was just a regular girls' day. But that night, alone in my apartment, I looked at the photos someone had posted online before I could stop myself. And there was Zoe in a white dress, looking radiant and beautiful and so happy it made my chest hurt. And there was Trevor looking at her the way I'd once thought he looked at me. And there was my mother in the front row, smiling like this was the wedding she'd always dreamed of. The worst part wasn't seeing them happy. The worst part was the photo of Zoe and I someone had posted from the reception where Zoe had apparently pulled me into a frame. No, wait, she hadn't pulled me. I wasn't there. But someone had posted a throwback photo of Zoe and I as kids with a caption about how family is forever and blood is thicker than water. The comments were full of people who didn't know what had happened, saying how sweet it was, how beautiful sisterhood is, how lucky they are to have each other. And I sat there looking at this photo of us as kids, remembering when we really were close, when I really did think family meant something unbreakable. That was the night I decided I was done, completely done. Not just with Zoe and Trevor, but with the entire concept of them. They could have their marriage and their happiness and their fantasy where they were the victims of love rather than the architects of betrayal. I was going to move on with my life and pretend they didn't exist. For 2 years, that's exactly what I did. I stopped checking social media for updates. I stopped asking mutual friends about them. I stopped letting them occupy any space in my brain. I dated other people, built my career, traveled to places I'd always wanted to see. I became someone new, someone stronger, someone who didn't need anyone's validation, someone who knew her worth. I thought I was over it. I thought I'd moved on. I thought the next chapter of my life had nothing to do with my sister or my ex-fiancé. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday night, almost exactly 3 years after I'd found them together. I remember because Tuesdays had become my favorite day of the week. I'd reclaimed them as mine, made them special again instead of letting them be haunted by that memory. Every Tuesday, I'd cook myself a nice dinner, light candles, and spend the evening doing something just for me, reading, drawing, watching movies, whatever I felt like. This particular Tuesday, I was working on a personal art project, something I'd been meaning to do for months. I had music playing, a glass of wine next to me, and I was actually happy, genuinely, peacefully happy, in a way I hadn't been sure I'd ever feel again. Then someone knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Lauren was out of town for a work conference, and I didn't have plans with anyone else. I almost didn't answer, but the knocking continued, urgent, desperate, the kind of knocking that makes you think something's wrong. I looked through the peephole and my heart stopped. Zoe, my sister, was standing in my hallway, and even through the distorted fisheye view of the peephole, I could see that something was very wrong. Her hair was a mess, she was wearing an oversized hoodie that I didn't recognize, and her face... God, her face. Even from here, I could see the bruises. My first thought was, no, absolutely not. Whatever this is, I don't want any part of it. My second thought was, is she bleeding? She knocked again, and I heard her voice muffled through the door. Naomi, please, I know you're home. Please, I need help. Please. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to pretend I wasn't here, to let her stand out there until she gave up and left. She'd made her choices 3 years ago. She'd chosen Trevor over me. She'd stolen my fiancé and married him and smiled about it. Whatever consequences she was facing now, they weren't my problem. But she was bleeding. I could see it now. A small cut above her eyebrow that was still fresh enough to be trickling blood down her temple. I thought about Dr. Diane, about all our conversations about boundaries and self-preservation and the difference between forgiveness and enabling. I thought about what Lauren would say if she were here. I thought about the satisfaction I'd felt 3 years ago when I'd imagined my sister's life falling apart, and that satisfaction suddenly felt dirty and wrong when I was looking at her actual battered face through my peephole. I opened the door. Zoe looked worse up close. The bruises were fresh, purpling around her left eye, a darker mark on her cheekbone, what looked like fingerprints on her neck. Her lip was split, and she was holding her left arm carefully, like it hurt to move. She was shaking, whether from cold or fear or shock, I couldn't tell. We stared at each other for a long moment. 3 years of silence, 3 years of hurt and anger and grief, all compressed into that single look. I waited for her to speak first. This was her knock, her interruption, her crisis. She could damn well be the one to explain it. I'm sorry. she said finally, and her voice cracked. I'm so sorry, Naomi, for everything. For 3 years ago, for tonight, for showing up here. But I didn't know where else to go. He's going to come looking for me, and I'm scared. And you're the only person I could think of who might. She stopped, swallowing hard. I'm sorry. Can I come in, please? I should have said no. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to close the door in her face, to tell her to call the police or a shelter or our mother or anyone else who might actually owe her something. I didn't owe her anything. She destroyed my life, and now she wanted me to save hers? But I looked at her face again, at the fear in her eyes, and I heard Dr. Diane's voice in my head. You get to decide who you want to be in every situation. You get to choose your response based on your values, not on other people's actions. Who did I want to be? Did I want to be the person who left her sister bleeding in a hallway because of what happened 3 years ago? Even after everything she'd done to me, did I want to be that person? Come in, I said, stepping aside. But we're calling the police, and then you're going to explain everything. Zoe practically collapsed through the doorway, and I had to catch her to keep her from falling. She was heavier than I expected, or maybe I'd forgotten how solid she was, how real. For 3 years, she'd been an abstract concept in my mind, my sister who betrayed me, but now she was here, flesh and blood and pain. I helped her to my couch and went to get my first aid kit. My hands were shaking as I pulled out antiseptic wipes and bandages. I didn't know what I was feeling. Anger, yes. Resentment, absolutely. But also something else. Something I didn't want to acknowledge because acknowledging it felt like betrayal of my past self, the self that'd been destroyed by this woman sitting on my couch. Tell me what happened, I said, quietly, sitting down across from her and starting to clean the cut above her eye. She winced but didn't pull away. Trevor, she said simply, and somehow those 2 syllables contained a whole story, the story I'd been afraid might be true but never wanted to believe. It started about 6 months ago. Small things at first. He'd get angry if dinner wasn't ready on time or if I forgot to pick up his dry cleaning. He'd yell, call me names, make me feel stupid, but it was never physical, not until tonight. She paused, closing her eyes as I pressed the antiseptic wipe against her cut. She winced but didn't pull away. We had a fight. A big one. I wanted to go back to school, get my degree finished. He said I was being selfish, that my job was to take care of him and our home. I tried to explain that I could do both, that lots of people work and go to school. He got so angry, Naomi, angrier than I've ever seen him. He grabbed me by the throat and slammed me against the wall. Then he hit me multiple times. I managed to get away and run out of the house, and I just started driving. I didn't even think about where I was going until I ended up here. I finished cleaning her wound and sat back, looking at her properly. My sister, the woman who destroyed my life, the woman who was now sitting in my living room, beaten by the man we'd both loved, asking me for help she had no right to expect. Why me? I asked quietly. After everything that happened between us, why did you come here? Zoe looked at me with eyes so full of pain and regret that it almost hurt to see. Because you're the only person I know who's strong enough to help me, and because, she swallowed hard, because you tried to warn me, didn't you? 3 years ago, when all this started, you tried to tell me what kind of man he was, and I didn't listen. I chose him over you, and you were right about everything. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words hanging between us. I got up and walked to my kitchen, needing space to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be my life. My sister, who'd stolen my fiancé, now sitting in my living room after he'd beaten her? I poured 2 glasses of water and brought them back to the couch. Zoe took hers with a mumbled thanks, her hand still shaking as she lifted it to her split lip. I need you to tell me everything, I said, sitting back down. Not just about tonight, everything. How did we get here? Zoe took a long sip of water, wincing as it touched her damaged lip. I don't even know where to start, Naomi. The whole thing is such a mess. Start with the truth, I said, my voice harder than I intended. Start with the real reason you got involved with Trevor in the first place. Because I've spent 3 years trying to understand, and the only conclusion I could come to was that you just didn't care about me enough not to do it. She flinched like I'd hit her. It wasn't like that, or maybe it was. I don't know anymore. She set down her water glass and wrapped her arms around herself. Do you remember how it was growing up? How Mom always compared us? How I was the pretty one and you were the smart one? How you got all the praise for your grades and your accomplishments, and I was just there? That's not true. It is true, she interrupted, her voice rising. It was always true, Naomi. You were the golden child, the responsible one, the one who did everything right. And I was the screw-up, the one who needed constant supervision, the one who disappointed everyone. Do you have any idea what that's like, living in your sister's shadow your entire life? I stared at her, genuinely shocked. Are you seriously trying to blame me for what you did? You stole my fiancé because you were jealous of me? No, I mean, yes, kind of. She put her head in her hands. I'm not explaining this right. When Trevor started paying attention to me, it felt like finally someone was choosing me first. Someone was seeing me instead of you. And I know that's messed up. I know that doesn't justify anything, but that's the truth you asked for. The honesty of it hit me like a punch to the gut. All these years, I thought she'd taken Trevor because she loved him, because they'd had some great romance that they couldn't help. But it was never about Trevor at all. It was about me. It was about her need to prove she could have something I had first. So you didn't even love him, I said slowly. You just wanted to win? I thought I loved him, Zoe said quietly. I convinced myself I did. But looking back now, knowing what I know about love and relationships and what actually matters, no, I don't think I ever really loved him. I loved the idea of being chosen. I loved feeling special. I loved the way it felt to have something you wanted. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the blood from her split lip. And I destroyed us both for it. I destroyed your life and I destroyed mine. And for what? For a man who never really loved either of us? Who was always just looking for someone to control? Wait, I said, my mind catching on to something she said. What do you mean he never really loved either of us? Zoe let out a bitter laugh. Oh, Naomi, there's so much you don't know. So much I didn't know until it was too late. She took another sip of water, steadying herself. Trevor didn't leave you because he fell in love with me. He left you because you were starting to ask questions. You were starting to see through his performance. Do you remember those last few months before we started our affair? I did remember. I'd been questioning some of his behavior, the way he'd criticize my clothes or my friends, the way he'd get angry when I didn't respond to his texts immediately, the way he'd started isolating me from people I cared about. I'd been pulling back, asserting boundaries, becoming less easy to control. He told me all about it, Zoe continued. How you were becoming difficult, how you used to be so easygoing and now you were always challenging him. He made it sound like you were the problem, like you'd changed and become someone impossible to deal with. And I believed him. God, I believed every word. So he went after you because I was harder to manipulate? Exactly. And I was so easy, Naomi. I was so desperate to be chosen, to be special, that I didn't see what was happening. He played me perfectly. He'd complain about you, build himself up as this victim of your unreasonable expectations, and position me as the understanding one, the one who really got him.
By the time anything physical happened between us, he'd already groomed me to see myself as his savior. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture I'd never wanted to see. And you didn't realize what he was doing until it was too late, until we were married and he had me exactly where he wanted me. Then the mask came off completely. She touched her bruised face gently. This didn't start tonight, Naomi. The verbal abuse started almost immediately after we got married. He'd criticize everything I did, how I dressed, how I talked, how I cleaned the house. Nothing was ever good enough. I'd try so hard to please him, to be the perfect wife he seemed to want, but it was never enough. Why didn't you leave? The question came out harsher than I meant it to. Where would I go? Back to Mom, who'd spent years telling me I'd finally done something right by marrying well? Back to my friends who I'd abandoned to spend all my time with Trevor? To you? She laughed bitterly. I gave up my right to have you when I did what I did. I knew that. She wiped her eyes carefully, avoiding the bruised areas. Do you know what the worst part is? Sometimes during the really bad fights, I'd think about you, about how I'd taken your place in this relationship, and I'd wonder if he'd been like this with you too, if that's why you'd been pulling away, if he'd seen something I'd been too blind to see. He wasn't like this with me, I said quietly. Not this bad anyway. But there were warning signs, red flags I was starting to notice. That's probably why he moved on to you. You weren't asking questions yet. We sat in silence, both of us processing the dark truth of what Trevor had done. He'd manipulated us both, played us against each other, discarded one for the other when the first started getting difficult to control, and Zoe paid the ultimate price for that manipulation. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. She nodded. Did he ever hurt you before tonight? Physically, I mean? Zoe was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, she pulled up the sleeve of her hoodie. Her arm was covered in bruises in various stages of healing, some fresh and purple, others fading to yellow and green. This has been happening for about 6 months, she whispered. Tonight was the first time he went for my face. I think he wanted to make sure no one could see the evidence before, but tonight he was so angry that he didn't care anymore. Looking at my sister's bruised arms, something shifted inside me. All the anger I'd been carrying for 3 years didn't disappear. It was still there, solid and real. But it was joined by something else now. Horror at what had been done to her. Guilt that maybe, just maybe, I could have prevented this if I'd handled things differently. And a fierce, unexpected protectiveness that I didn't want to feel but couldn't deny. We need to call the police, I said, standing up and reaching for my phone. No, Zoe grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong despite her injuries. Please, Naomi, don't. He'll find out. He has connections with some of the officers in our district. He'll know where I am and he'll come get me. Then we'll get a restraining order. You think a piece of paper is going to stop him? She laughed, a broken sound. You don't know what he's like when he's angry. He's convinced himself that I belong to him, that he has every right to do whatever he wants with me. A restraining order will just make him angrier. I pulled my wrist gently from her grip and sat back down. Okay, let's think this through. You can't go back to him, obviously. Do you have anywhere else you can go? I told you I have nowhere. No friends left, he made sure of that. Mom won't understand. She'll just try to convince me to work it out with him. And I don't have any money saved. He controls all our finances. I don't even have access to our bank accounts without his permission. This was worse than I thought. Trevor hadn't just beaten her, he'd systematically isolated and trapped her. Classic abuser playbook. We can stay here, I heard myself say, and immediately wanted to take it back. What was I doing? This was my sister who destroyed my life, the sister I'd spent 3 years cutting out of my existence. And now I'm inviting her to move in? Really? Zoe looked at me with such hope that it hurt. You'd let me stay after everything I did to you? Temporarily, I said firmly, just until we figure out a better plan. And there are going to be rules, boundaries. This isn't me forgiving you or us suddenly being best friends again. This is me making sure you're safe because despite everything, you're still my sister. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, Naomi. I promise I won't. Don't make promises, I interrupted. Just focus on getting through tonight. We'll deal with everything else tomorrow. I showed her to my guest room, really just a small office with a pull-out couch, and found some clean clothes for her to sleep in. She showered, and I tried not to think about the fact that my sister, who's stolen my fiancé, was now using my shower and sleeping in my apartment and depending on me for safety. After she was settled, I went back to the living room and called Lauren, even though I knew she was at her conference and probably couldn't talk. She answered on the second ring. Hey, what's up? Everything okay? Zoe's here, I said without preamble, at my apartment. Trevor beat her up and she showed up at my door and I let her in and now she's staying in my guest room and I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if this is the right choice or the stupidest thing I've ever done. There was a long pause. Okay, let me process this. Zoe, as in your sister who married your ex-fiancé 3 years ago? That Zoe? That's the one. And Trevor beat her up? Multiple times, apparently. Tonight was just the worst. Another pause. I could practically hear Lauren's brain working through all the implications. How do you feel about this? I have no idea. Angry, scared, confused, guilty, which I hate because I shouldn't feel guilty about anything here. She made her choices. But looking at her face, Lauren, at what he did to her, I couldn't just leave her there. No, you couldn't, because that's not who you are. Lauren's voice was soft. You're one of the kindest people I know, Naomi. Even when you have every right to be cruel, you choose kindness. It's one of the things I love most about you. This doesn't feel like kindness. It feels like I'm betraying myself, betraying the version of me that suffered when they got together. You're not betraying anyone. You're just being human, complex, messy, human. Listen, I'll be back in 2 days. Until then, keep your boundaries clear. Help her because it's the right thing to do, but don't let her manipulate you or make you responsible for fixing her entire life, okay? Okay, I agreed, though I wasn't sure I was capable of maintaining those boundaries. And Naomi, call Dr. Diane tomorrow. You're going to need support through this too. After we hung up, I sat in my living room for a long time, trying to figure out how my peaceful Tuesday night had turned into this. I thought about the woman sleeping in my guest room, the woman who'd caused me so much pain. I thought about Trevor, the man I'd almost married, and what he'd become, or maybe what he'd always been that I just hadn't seen. I thought about revenge fantasies I'd had over the past 3 years, how I'd imagined my sister's marriage falling apart, how I'd pictured her realizing what she'd lost when she chose Trevor over our relationship. But in none of those fantasies I'd imagined this. I'd never wished abuse on her. I'd never wanted her to suffer like this. And that's when I realized something important. Being hurt by someone doesn't mean you want them to be hurt in return. Wanting justice doesn't mean wanting violence. And helping someone who wronged you doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong enough to look past your pain and see another human being who needs help. I called Dr. Diane's emergency line, something I'd never done before in 3 years of therapy. She answered after a few rings, her voice alert despite the late hour. Naomi, what happened? I told her everything: Zoe's appearance, Trevor's abuse, my decision to let her stay. When I finished, there was a long silence. "How do you feel about what you've done?" she asked finally. "I don't know. Confused, conflicted. Part of me thinks I'm crazy for helping her after what she did. Part of me thinks I'm doing the right thing. And I'm scared, Dr. Diane. I'm scared that this is going to undo all the healing I've done, that letting her back into my life, even temporarily, is going to destroy me all over again." "Those are all valid concerns," she said, "but I want you to consider something. You're not the same person you were 3 years ago. You're not that woman who was blindsided by the trail and didn't know how to protect herself. You've spent 3 years learning your worth, setting boundaries, building strength. That doesn't disappear because you're showing compassion to someone who hurt you. So you think I did the right thing? I think you made the choice that aligned with your values. Whether it's the right thing or not, we'll see. But Naomi, you need to be very careful here. Your sister is in crisis, and people in crisis can be unpredictable. Maintain your boundaries. Don't let old patterns resurface. And most importantly, don't lose yourself in trying to save her. You can offer support without sacrificing your own well-being. How do I do that? We'll figure it out together. Can you come in tomorrow? I'll rearrange my schedule. Yes, thank you, Dr. Diane. You're going to be okay, Naomi. You're stronger than you think. After I hung up, I checked on Zoe one more time. She was asleep, curled into a small ball on the pull-out couch, and in the dim light from the hallway, she looked young and vulnerable and nothing like the triumphant bride I'd seen in wedding photos 3 years ago. I closed the door quietly and went to my own room. Tomorrow, I'd figure out next steps. Tomorrow, I'd deal with all the complications this was going to bring. But tonight, I'd done what I could do. I'd offered safety to someone who needed it, even though that someone had hurt me deeply. And maybe that was enough. For now, it had to be enough.
I woke up the next morning to the smell of coffee brewing. For a moment, I was disoriented, wondering if I'd imagined the entire previous night. Then I remembered. Zoe was here, in my apartment, and apparently she'd found her way to my kitchen. I got out of bed and pulled on a robe, steeling myself for whatever this day was going to bring. In the light of morning, with my anger less fresh and my shock less raw, I was already starting to question my decision to let her stay. Zoe was standing at my kitchen counter, carefully pouring coffee into 2 mugs. In the bright morning light, her injuries looked even worse. The bruises were darker, more defined, and there was a slight swelling around her eye that I hadn't noticed last night. "I hope it's okay that I made coffee," she said without turning around. I couldn't sleep, and I thought it might be a peace offering or something. "It's fine," I said, accepting the mug she offered. We stood there, awkwardly, 2 sisters who'd once been close but now barely knew how to exist in the same space. "Naomi, I need to say this before anything else happens." Zoe set down her mug and looked at me directly. "What I did to you 3 years ago was unforgivable. There's no excuse for it, no explanation that makes it okay. I betrayed you in the worst possible way, and I destroyed your trust and your relationship and your happiness. And then I had the nerve to act like I was the victim, like I couldn't help falling in love. But it was all a lie, every bit of it." I didn't say anything, just sipped my coffee and waited for her to continue. "I've had 3 years to think about what I did, 3 years of living with the consequences of that choice, and I want you to know that not a single day went by when I didn't think about you, about what I took from you." Her voice cracked. "I know showing up here last night was selfish. I know I have no right to ask you for help, but I also need you to know that I'm not asking you to forgive me or forget what I did. I'm just asking you to help me get out of this situation, and then I'll disappear from your life again if that's what you want." "What do you mean, if that's what I want? Of course that's what I want.
The words came out harsher than I intended, but I couldn't seem to stop them. You think one night of me helping you means we're going to be sisters again? That we're going to have coffee and chat about our lives and pretend the past 3 years didn't happen? No, I don't think that. I would never presume. Good, because that's not happening. I set down my coffee mug with more force than necessary. I'm helping you because you're in danger and because leaving you in that situation would be cruel, but that doesn't erase what you did. It doesn't mean I trust you or want you in my life permanently. As soon as we figure out a safe plan for you, you're gone. We're clear on that? Crystal clear, Zoe said quietly, and I saw tears gathering in her eyes. But I couldn't afford to feel bad about my words. I needed these boundaries. I needed her to understand that my compassion had limits. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Diane. "I have an opening at 10 a.m. if you can make it." I texted back that I'd be there, then turned to Zoe. "I have a therapy appointment in a few hours. You need to stay here, stay quiet, and stay away from the windows. If Trevor knows where I live—" "He doesn't. I never told him about you, about where you moved after everything happened. He knows you exist, obviously, but he doesn't know your address or where you work or anything specific." "You're sure?" "I'm sure. I may have destroyed our relationship, but I wasn't going to give him the information to stalk you. I had that much sense at least." We spent the next hour sitting in uncomfortable silence, both of us pretending to be interested in our phones while sneaking glances at each other. I kept noticing little things, how she flinched when I moved too quickly, how she kept one hand near her phone like she was expecting a call, how she jumped at every sound from the hallway. "Has he tried to contact you?" 17 times. She showed me her phone. The screen was full of missed calls and text messages, all from Trevor. I could see the beginnings of the messages in the preview. "Where are you? You can't just leave. You're going to regret this." Each one progressively angrier. "We need to save these," I said, "as evidence in case you decide to press charges or get a restraining order." "I'm not pressing charges." "Zoe!" "I'm not," she said firmly. "I just want to disappear, start over somewhere else, somewhere he can't find me. I don't want to deal with police and lawyers and having to relive the worst moments of my life in a courtroom while he sits there glaring at me." I understood her fear, even if I didn't agree with her decision. "Okay, then we focus on getting you out safely. Do you have anything you need from the house? Documents, clothes, personal items?" "Everything's there. My ID, my social security card, everything. But I can't go back, Naomi. Even with police escort, I can't go back to that house." "Then we'll figure out another way." I checked the time. "I need to get ready for my appointment. While I'm gone, make a list of everything you'll need, documents, essential items, whatever. We'll figure out how to get them or replace them." At Dr. Diane's office, I unloaded everything. My confusion, my anger, my fear that I was making a mistake, my worry that helping Zoe would undo all my healing. Dr. Diane listened carefully, asking questions, helping me sort through the tangled mess of my emotions. "You're trying to hold two truths at the same time," she said when I finished. "The truth that your sister betrayed you terribly, and the truth that she's now a victim who needs help. Both things are true, Naomi. One doesn't cancel out the other." "But how do I help her without losing myself, without letting old patterns take over?" "By maintaining clear boundaries, by not taking responsibility for fixing her entire life, by remembering that helping someone doesn't mean trusting them or excusing their past behavior." Dr. Diane leaned forward. "You can have compassion for what she's going through now while still protecting yourself from further hurt. They're not mutually exclusive." "So you think I should help her?" "I think you're already helping her. The question is how long and in what ways, and those are answers only you can provide. But Naomi, I want you to be very careful. Your sister is in crisis, and people in crisis sometimes do desperate things. Don't assume that because she needs you now, she's changed as a person. Give her space to prove that over time, if you decide to allow that, but don't give her your trust just because she's suffering. When I got back to my apartment, I found Zoe had been busy. She'd made a list of necessary documents and items, cleaned my kitchen, and was folding a load of laundry I'd left in the dryer days ago. "You don't need to do that," I said, feeling uncomfortable with her domestic presence in my space. "I want to help. I need to feel useful, and I need to show you that I'm grateful for what you're doing. I don't need your gratitude. I need you to respect my boundaries and work towards getting yourself out of this situation." She nodded, but I could see hurt flash across her face. Good, I thought, then immediately felt guilty for thinking that. This was exactly what Dr. Diane had warned me about, the confusion of trying to help someone while protecting yourself. That afternoon, we made a plan. Zoe would stay with me for no more than 2 weeks while we figured out a long-term solution. In that time, we'd work on getting her documents, finding her a job, and locating a safe place for her to stay. I'd help her financially to get started, but after that, she was on her own. 2 weeks, I repeated. That's all I can do. 2 weeks, she agreed. Thank you, Naomi. I know this isn't easy for you. No, it's not, but it's the right thing to do. I paused. That doesn't mean we're okay, though. It just means I'm not willing to let you get hurt more than you already have. That night, as I lay in bed unable to sleep, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake, wondered if 2 weeks would turn into 2 months, if helping Zoe would mean letting her back into my life permanently, wondered if I was strong enough to maintain my boundaries when faced with someone who knew exactly which emotional buttons to push. But I also thought about the woman sleeping in my guest room, the woman who'd once been my little sister before she became my betrayer. And I thought about the kind of person I wanted to be, not someone who looked away from suffering because it was inconvenient, but someone who could hold space for complexity and pain while still protecting her own heart. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, I was certain, but tonight I'd done what I could, and that had to be enough.
3 days into Zoe's stay, Trevor found us. I should have known he would. I should have been more careful, more paranoid, more something. But I'd let my guard down, thinking that because Zoe hadn't told him where I lived, we were safe. I'd forgotten that determined people find ways. It was Saturday afternoon. Zoe and I had just returned from a quick trip to Target to get her some basic necessities, toiletries, a change of clothes, things she needed to exist beyond the single outfit she'd arrived in. We were laughing, actually laughing, about something stupid one of the cashiers had said. It was the first moment of lightness we'd shared, the first crack in the wall of tension between us. Then we pulled into my apartment complex parking lot, and there he was. Trevor was leaning against a black BMW, new since I'd known him, but still precisely the kind of flashy car he'd always wanted. He was dressed in an expensive suit, his hair perfectly styled, looking every inch the successful investment banker. If you didn't know what he was capable of, you'd think he was just a handsome, well-dressed man waiting for someone. But I knew, and Zoe knew. The moment she saw him, she went rigid in her seat, her breath catching in a way that told me this was terror, not just fear. "Drive past," she whispered. "Don't stop. Just drive past and keep going." But it was too late. He'd seen us. He pushed off the car and started walking toward us, his expression pleasant, casual, like he was greeting old friends instead of hunting his wife. "Lock your door," I told Zoe, even as I was locking mine. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, holding it ready. Trevor reached my car and knocked on the window. Through the glass, I could see his smile, charming, practiced, dangerous. "Naomi," he said, his voice muffled but audible, "it's been a long time. You look good. Can we talk?" "No," I said through the closed window. "Leave, now."
I just want to talk to my wife. She's had a misunderstanding and ran away, and I've been worried sick. Surely you can understand that, Naomi. You remember how it was between us, how much we cared about each other?" The manipulation in his voice was so obvious now. How had I ever fallen for it? How had I ever thought this man loved me? "The police are on their way," I said, holding up my phone. "You need to leave." His pleasant expression flickered just for a second. There was the real Trevor, the angry, controlling man beneath the polished exterior. "Zoe, baby, come on!" He tried to see around me to where she was pressed against the passenger door. "Let's go home. Whatever's upset you, we can work it out. You know I love you. You know I'd never do anything to hurt you on purpose." "You beat her," I found myself shouting. "You put your hands on her and hurt her, and that wasn't on purpose? Leave, Trevor, leave now, or I swear I will press this call button and you'll be explaining to police why you're stalking your wife." "I'm not stalking anyone. I'm trying to talk to my wife, who's clearly been influenced by someone who's never gotten over the fact that I chose someone else." He leaned closer to the window. "Come on, Naomi, you're better than this. Don't let your bitterness about our past make you do something you'll regret." And there it was, the gaslighting, the attempt to make me question my own perception of reality. But I'd had 3 years and a lot of therapy to learn how to spot it. "I'm pressing charges," Zoe said suddenly, her voice stronger than I'd heard her since she'd arrived. "I'm going to the police and I'm showing them these bruises, and I'm telling them everything you've done. I have evidence, photos, text messages, everything." Trevor's face changed completely. The mask dropped, and what I saw underneath was rage, pure, undiluted rage. "You ungrateful little—" He slammed his hand against my car window, and both Zoe and I jumped. "After everything I've done for you, after I saved you from your pathetic life, gave you a home, a position, respect, this is how you repay me?" "You didn't save me from anything," Zoe said, and I was amazed at her courage. "You isolated me, controlled me, and hurt me, and I'm done. I'm not coming back, Trevor. Ever." He slammed the window again, this time harder, and I pressed the call button. Within seconds, a 911 operator was on the line, asking about my emergency. "I'm in the parking lot of Oakwood Apartments on 7th Street. My ex-fiancé is here threatening me and my sister. He's physically abusive and we need police here now." The mention of police seemed to snap Trevor back to reality. He stepped away from the car, his hands up, in a gesture of innocence that made me sick. "This isn't over, Zoe," he said, his voice calm again, controlled. "You're my wife. You belong to me. You can run, but you can't hide. I'll find you wherever you go." Then he walked back to his BMW, got in, and drove away slowly, casually, like he had all the time in the world, like he knew something we didn't. The police arrived 5 minutes later. I gave them my statement, showed them the text messages Trevor had sent Zoe, described what had just happened. Zoe showed them her bruises, finally, reluctantly, allowing them to photograph the evidence of what Trevor had done. "We can arrest him for assault," Officer Hayes said, a kind-faced black woman who seemed genuinely concerned. "With this evidence and your testimony, we can make it stick, but you'll need to follow through, testify if it goes to trial. Are you prepared to do that?" Zoe looked at me, her eyes asking a question I couldn't answer for her. This was her choice to make. "Yes," she said finally, "I'll do it. I'll testify. I'm done letting him control me." Officer Hayes nodded approvingly. "Good," she said. "We'll also help you get an emergency restraining order. In the meantime, is there somewhere safe you can stay? Somewhere he doesn't know about?" "She's staying with me," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "And he doesn't know this address, or at least he didn't until today." "Then you might want to consider staying somewhere else for a few days, just until we pick him up and process the charges. Do you have somewhere you can go?" I thought about Lauren, still at her conference but due back tomorrow. I thought about my mother, who still didn't know any of this was happening. I thought about all the ways this situation was spiraling beyond what I'd agreed to. "We'll figure something out," I said. After the police left, Zoe and I sat in my car for a long time, neither of us quite ready to go inside and face what had just happened. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I brought this to your door. I put you in danger. I should never have come here." "No, you should have come. You needed help, and I'm glad you came to me rather than trying to handle this alone." The words surprised me, but I meant them. Somewhere in the past few days, my feelings about this situation had shifted. I still didn't trust Zoe. I still hadn't forgiven her for what she'd done 3 years ago. But I also recognized that she was genuinely trying to escape an abusive situation, and that took courage. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we pack bags and go to my friend Lauren's place. She's been bugging me for her spare key back anyway. Perfect excuse to show up uninvited." I tried for a smile. "And then we figure out next steps, together. But Zoe, you need to understand something. This changes the timeline. You can't stay with me anymore, not if Trevor knows where I live. We need to find you somewhere safe, somewhere permanent, and we need to do it fast." "I understand," she said. "And Naomi, thank you for everything. I know I don't deserve it, but thank you." I didn't respond, because the truth was I still didn't know how I felt about any of this. I was helping her because it was right, because walking away would have made me someone I didn't want to be, but that didn't mean we were okay. As we went upstairs to pack our things, I couldn't shake the image of Trevor's face when Zoe had said she was pressing charges, the rage there barely controlled, the promise in his words that this wasn't over. For the first time, I wondered if helping my sister might cost me more than I'd bargained for. But it was too late to back out now. We were in this together, whether I liked it or not.
Lauren's apartment became our sanctuary for the next week. She came back from her conference, took one look at both of us, and didn't ask a single question, just handed us wine and ordered pizza, and let us decompress. By the second day, though, she pulled me aside. "Okay, I've given you time to process. Now talk to me. How are you really doing with all this?" We were in her kitchen while Zoe showered. I could hear the water running through the walls, a reminder that we weren't alone even in this conversation. "I don't know," I admitted. "Sometimes I look at her and I see my little sister, the person I grew up with, the person I loved and trusted. And sometimes I see the woman who destroyed my life, and I can't figure out how to reconcile those two people." "Maybe you don't have to," Lauren said. "Maybe she's both. Maybe people are complicated and messy and capable of both terrible betrayals and genuine suffering. The question isn't whether she deserves your help. That's not really the right framework. The question is whether helping her costs you more than you can afford to give." I thought about that. What if I can't afford it? What if this breaks something in me that I can't fix? Then you set boundaries and you walk away. You've already done more than most people would have, Naomi. You've given her safety and support and helped her start the process of escaping. If that's all you can do, that's enough. You don't owe her your continued presence in her life just because you helped her through a crisis. That night, Zoe and I finally had the conversation we'd been avoiding. Lauren had tactfully gone to bed early, leaving us alone in the living room with the kind of silence that demands to be filled. "Can I ask you something?" Zoe said, curled up on the opposite end of the couch from me. "And will you promise to tell me the truth?" "I'll try." "Did you ever really forgive me? Before all this happened with Trevor, I mean. In those 3 years, did you ever get to a place where you weren't angry anymore?" I considered lying, softening it, but she'd asked for truth. "No. I worked through a lot of the pain, processed the betrayal, built a new life, but forgive you? No.
Every time I thought I might be getting close, something would remind me of what you did and the anger would come flooding back. She nodded like she'd expected that answer. Do you think you'll ever be able to? I don't know, Zoe. Maybe, but not because of this situation, if that's what you're asking. You getting hurt by Trevor doesn't erase what you did to me. It's a separate thing, a terrible thing, but separate. I know that, she said quickly. I'm not trying to trade traumas or suggest that my suffering somehow balances out your pain. I need to know if there's any possibility that someday we could be sisters again, real sisters, not just two people connected by blood and trauma. I was quiet for a long time, thinking about her question. I don't know, Zoe. I honestly don't know. Right now, I can help you because you're in danger and because it's the right thing to do. But beyond that, I can't make any promises. You broke something between us that might not be fixable. Even if I spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you? You can't make it up to me. There's no amount of apology or good behavior or time that can undo what happened. The only thing you can do is become a better person going forward and hope that eventually I might be willing to have some kind of relationship with that better person. But even then, we'll never be what we were. That's gone, Zoe. We both need to accept that. She started crying, and part of me wanted to comfort her, but a stronger part recognized that this was necessary pain, the pain of facing consequences and accepting that some things can't be fixed. I really did love him, she said through her tears. Or I thought I did. I convinced myself that what we had was real, that our connection justified the hurt we caused you. But looking back, I don't think I ever really loved him. I think I loved the attention, the feeling of being chosen, the validation that I was worth more than I'd always thought. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to understand that I'm not just a terrible person who hurt you for no reason. I was a messed up person who made a terrible choice because of my own insecurities and issues. That doesn't excuse it, but it might help you understand it. I don't need to understand it, I said, perhaps harshly than necessary. Understanding why you did it doesn't make it hurt less, and honestly, your reasons kind of make it worse. You destroyed our relationship, my relationship with Trevor, my trust in everyone around me, and you did it because you needed validation, because you were competing with me? When you put it like that, it sounds so petty. It was petty. It was small and selfish and cruel. And now you're dealing with the consequences of choosing someone who was capable of that kind of betrayal. Because people who cheat with you will cheat on you. People who help you break someone else's trust don't magically become trustworthy. She flinched like I'd hit her. I know that now. God, do I know that now. We sat in painful silence for a while. Then Zoe spoke again, her voice small and broken. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't done what I did? If Trevor and I never got together? If you'd married him instead? Every day for the first year, I admitted. I'd think about what my life would have looked like. The wedding, the house we'd planned to buy, maybe kids eventually, all of it. But then I started realizing that if he could do what he did with you, he would have done it with someone else eventually. You didn't create the problem, Zoe. You just revealed it sooner. So I did you a favor? She laughed bitterly. No, don't twist this into something noble. You didn't do me a favor. You caused me immense pain. But the silver lining, and it's a thin silver lining, is that I didn't waste years of my life with someone who would eventually show his true colors. I got out before I was married, before I had kids, before I was trapped the way you ended up trapped. I really am sorry, Naomi. I know I've said it before, but I mean it. I'm sorry for everything, for the betrayal, for the pain, for the way I smiled at you at my wedding like I'd won some prize. I was so caught up in my own narrative, so convinced that Trevor and I were some great love story that I couldn't see what I was doing to you. I saw that smile. I said quietly. I saw it, and it broke something in me that took years to fix. You looked so happy, so triumphant, and I looked at you and thought, she doesn't even care. She destroyed my life, and she doesn't even care. I did care. I just couldn't let myself acknowledge it because then I'd have to acknowledge what I'd done. So I pretended everything was fine, that we were happy, that it was all meant to be. But I thought about you every day of my marriage, Naomi. Every day of my marriage, I thought about you and what I'd sacrificed to be with him. And now you're paying the price for that choice. I am, and maybe I deserve to pay it. Maybe this is karma or justice or whatever you want to call it. No one deserves to be abused, Zoe, not even people who make terrible choices. What Trevor did to you is completely wrong, regardless of how you got into that relationship. Take a deep breath. But I need you to understand something. Me helping you doesn't mean I forgive you. It means I'm choosing to be the kind of person who helps people in crisis, even when those people have hurt me. Don't confuse my compassion with absolution. I won't, she promised. I know the difference. The next morning, Officer Hayes called. They'd arrested Trevor at his office. He'd posted bail within hours, but there was now a restraining order in place. He was ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from Zoe, from me, and from any addresses associated with either of us. A restraining order is just paper, Officer Hayes warned us. It doesn't physically stop him from coming near you. You need to stay vigilant, okay? And if he violates it, you call us immediately. After the call, Zoe looked at me with something like hope in her eyes. Maybe it's really over. Maybe I can actually start moving on. Maybe, I agreed, though I wasn't convinced. Men like Trevor didn't just accept defeat. But I didn't say that. Zoe needed hope right now, and I wasn't going to be the one to take it away from her. What I didn't know then was that Trevor had already made his next move, and it would force both of us to confront the question I'd been avoiding. How far was I willing to go to protect the sister who'd betrayed me?
2 days later, I got a call from Keisha, my coworker at the design firm. Her voice was tight with worry. Naomi, there's a man here asking about you. Says he's an old friend, but something feels off. He's asking what hours you work, whether you're here today, when you usually leave. I told him I couldn't share that information, but he's persistent. And Naomi, he matches the description of the guy you told me about, Trevor. My blood ran cold. Don't tell him anything. Call security if he doesn't leave. Already did. They're escorting him out now. But Naomi, he seems really determined. I think you should work from home for a few days. After I hung up, I told Zoe what had happened. She went pale, her hands shaking as she set down the tea she'd been drinking. He's not going to stop, she whispered. The restraining order, the arrest, none of it matters to him. He's going to keep coming until he gets what he wants. Which is what? Me back, or revenge for me leaving, probably both. She looked at me, fear clear in her eyes. We need to run, Naomi. Leave Charlotte, change our names, disappear. It's the only way. We? Zoe, I'm not running from my life because of your ex-husband. Then I'll go alone. I can't keep putting you in danger. You've done enough, more than enough. But even as she said it, I knew she had nowhere to go. No money, no job, no one else to turn to. If she ran, she'd be running blind, and Trevor would eventually find her. Men like him always did. I spent that night unable to sleep, wrestling with an impossible choice. I could continue helping Zoe, potentially putting myself at risk indefinitely, or I could cut her loose, give her whatever money I could spare, and send her on her way, returning to my own life and leaving her to figure out hers. Dr. Diane said I could help without sacrificing myself, but what she hadn't told me was how to know when you'd reached that line, when helping became sacrificing.
The answer came the next morning in the worst possible way. I'd gone out early to grab coffee for all of us from the shop down the street from Lauren's place. It was barely 7 a.m., the sun just starting to rise, the streets quiet. I was waiting at the counter for my order when I saw him. Trevor, sitting in a car across the street, watching Lauren's building. He saw me see him, and he smiled. That same charming, dangerous smile I'd seen through my car window days ago. Then he pointed at me, then at his phone. A clear message, "I'm watching you. I know where you are." I grabbed my coffees and walked back to Lauren's apartment as calmly as I could, but my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped everything. When I got inside, I set the cups down and immediately called Officer Hayes. "He's violating the restraining order," she said. "We can arrest him again, but he'll just post bail again, unless you want to press charges for stalking, which would take time to build a case." "What would actually keep him away?" I asked desperately. There was a pause. "Honestly, distance. If your sister moved to another state, somewhere he couldn't easily follow, that would be your best bet. Or—" Another pause. "We've had success in domestic violence cases when the victim agrees to participate in a relocation program. It's not witness protection exactly, but it's a structured way to help abuse survivors start over somewhere new." After I hung up, I gathered Zoe and Lauren and told them both what had happened. Zoe started crying immediately, apologizing over and over for bringing this danger into my life. "Stop apologizing and start planning," I said, more harshly than I intended. "Officer Hayes told me about a relocation program. It would help you start over somewhere new, somewhere Trevor can't find you. I think you should do it." "And just leave? Leave you to deal with whatever he might do out of revenge?" "He's not after me. He's after you. Once you're gone, I won't be a target anymore." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. Trevor knew I'd helped Zoe. In his twisted mind, that might be enough reason to come after me. I might be trading my sister's immediate safety for my own long-term danger. Zoe seemed to read my thoughts. "He'll come after you because you helped me. You know that, right? This is my fault, all of it. I chose him, I stayed with him, and now you're paying the price for my decisions." "Maybe," I acknowledged, "but that doesn't change what needs to happen. You need to get somewhere safe, somewhere Trevor can't find you, and I need to reclaim my life, protect myself, and figure out what comes next." "What about us?" Zoe asked quietly. "After I leave, will I ever see you again?" It was the question I'd been avoiding, and standing there in Lauren's living room, with Trevor lurking somewhere outside, with our lives in chaos because of choices we'd both made, I finally had an answer. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe, someday, when enough time has passed and we've both healed and grown. But right now we need to focus on survival, not on rebuilding a relationship that might not be salvageable." "That's fair," Zoe said, though I could see the pain in her eyes. "More than fair, actually. You've given me more than I deserved." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Officer Hayes connected us with a domestic violence counselor named Simone, who helped Zoe apply for the relocation program. Within a week, Zoe had been accepted and assigned to a caseworker who would help her start over in Portland, Oregon, far enough that Trevor would have a hard time finding her, but not so far that it felt like another country. The night before Zoe was scheduled to leave, we sat up late talking, really talking for the first time in 3 years, about our childhood, our relationship, the ways we'd hurt each other even before Trevor came along. "I was jealous of you," Zoe admitted. "My whole life I was jealous of how together you were, how confident, how Mom seemed to respect you more, and instead of dealing with those feelings in a healthy way, I let them poison me. I let them push me toward terrible decisions."
I wasn't as together as you thought. I was just better at hiding my insecurities. Maybe, but you were also genuinely good at things I struggled with, and instead of being proud of my sister, I resented you for it. That says more about me than it ever did about you. We talked until sunrise, not fixing anything. Some things can't be fixed, but at least acknowledging the complexity of what had happened between us. When it was time for Zoe to leave, I drove her to the bus station. She'd refused to let me take her to the airport, worried that Trevor might be watching, might somehow follow her. The bus seemed safer, more anonymous. At the station, we stood facing each other, two sisters who'd been through hell together and apart. "Thank you," Zoe said, tears streaming down her face, "for everything, for saving my life even though I didn't deserve it, for showing me what real strength looks like, for being the person I should have tried to be." "Just be safe," I said, "and Zoe, actually become a better person. Don't just survive this, learn from it, grow from it, make these past few years mean something." "I will. I promise I will." She hesitated. "Can I hug you?" I nodded, and she pulled me into an embrace that felt both familiar and foreign. She smelled different than I remembered, and her body was thinner, more fragile. But underneath it all, she was still my sister, broken, flawed, capable of terrible betrayal, but still my sister. "If you ever need anything," I started, then stopped because I didn't know how to finish that sentence. I didn't know what I was offering or what boundaries I needed to maintain. "I know," Zoe said, reading my hesitation, "and I won't reach out unless it's an emergency. I'll give you space to heal, to decide if you ever want me in your life again. That's the least I can do." She picked up her single bag, everything she owned now fit into one duffel bag, and walked toward her bus. At the door, she turned back and waved. I waved back, and then she was gone. I stood there for a long time after the bus pulled away, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. I'd done what I could. I'd helped her escape, given her a chance to start over. Whether she took that chance and made something good out of it was up to her now. As I drove back to Lauren's apartment, I still wasn't ready to go home, not with Trevor potentially watching. I thought about everything that had happened in the past 2 weeks, how my peaceful life had been upended by a knock on my door, how I'd been forced to face my past and make impossible choices, how helping someone who'd hurt me revealed things about myself I hadn't known. I'd learned that I was stronger than I thought, that I could show compassion without sacrificing my boundaries, that helping someone didn't mean trusting them or forgiving them or forgetting what they'd done. But I'd also learned that some wounds don't heal cleanly, that some relationships, once broken, might never be fully repaired, and that sometimes the best you can do is help someone from a distance and hope they find their own way forward. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Diane. "How are you holding up?" I typed back, "I will be, eventually." And I believed it. It would take time, probably a lot of time, to process everything that had happened, to feel safe in my own home again, to rebuild the peace I'd spent 3 years creating. But I would do it, because that's what survivors do. We rebuild, we heal, we move forward, carrying our scars, but not letting them define us. Zoe was gone, off to start her new life. Trevor, hopefully, would face consequences for his actions, though I wasn't naive enough to think the justice system would fully protect us. And I was here, still standing, still surviving, still figuring out who I wanted to be. It wasn't the ending I imagined when Zoe first showed up at my door, but it was the ending we'd earned, both of us, imperfect, complicated, and real. So, here I am now, 6 months after Zoe left for Portland. 6 months of slowly reclaiming my life, my space, my peace. Trevor was sentenced to probation and mandatory anger management classes for the assault. Not enough, in my opinion, but at least there's a paper trail now, a record of what he did. The restraining order remains in place, and so far he's kept his distance. Either the legal consequences scared him, or he's moved on to another target. I try not to think about that possibility too much. I moved to a new apartment, one Trevor has never seen. Lauren helped me pack up my old place, and we made it an occasion, ordering pizza, drinking wine, laughing about how many times I'd moved in the past 3 years. Each move felt like shedding skin, becoming someone new. Zoe texts me occasionally, short messages, respectful of my boundaries. I got a job at a coffee shop, started therapy, thinking of you. I respond sometimes, briefly, letting her know I've received her messages without opening the door to deeper conversation. Maybe someday I'll be ready for more, but not yet. Dr. Diane and I still meet weekly. We talk about trauma, about complex emotions, about how you can help someone and still protect yourself, about how forgiveness isn't required for healing, but letting go of anger is. I'm working on that last part. Lauren told me something the other day that stuck with me. She said, "You know what I admire most about how you handled all this? You didn't let what Zoe did to you 3 years ago turn you into someone who could walk away from someone in danger. You stayed true to yourself even when it was hard." I hadn't thought about it that way, but maybe she was right. Maybe the real victory wasn't whether Zoe and I reconciled or whether Trevor faced justice. Maybe it was that I'd managed to help someone who'd hurt me without losing myself in the process. People ask me sometimes if I regret helping her, if I wished I'd closed the door that night and pretended I wasn't home. And honestly, I don't know. Some days I think about how much simpler my life would be if I had. Other days, I'm proud that I chose compassion over revenge. What I do know is this: we all have moments where we get to choose who we want to be, moments where we can let our pain make us cruel or let our strength make us kind. That night when Zoe showed up at my door, I had that choice, and I chose kindness, even though it cost me. I chose to break the cycle, to refuse to let betrayal turn me into someone who couldn't see another person's suffering, to be stronger than my hurt. And maybe that's the real story here. Not the betrayal or the abuse or the dramatic confrontations, but the quiet choice to help anyway, to be complicated and human and imperfect, to hold space for nuance in a world that wants everything to be simple. Zoe and I may never be close again. We may never fully reconcile. But I gave her a chance to escape, to survive, to start over. And she gave me a chance to prove to myself that I'm the kind of person I always hoped I'd be. Someone who doesn't let past hurt dictate present actions. So to everyone watching this, everyone who stuck around to hear this whole messy, complicated story, I don't have a neat lesson for you. I can't tell you what the right choice would have been because I'm still not sure there was one. All I can tell you is what I learned. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most end up needing our help. And when that happens, we get to decide what kind of person we want to be in that moment. Not who they deserve us to be, but who we want to be. You can help without forgiving. You can protect someone without trusting them. You can show compassion while maintaining boundaries. These things aren't contradictory. They're just complex, like people, like life, like the messy, complicated journey we're all on. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. Thank you for sitting with this story and all its uncomfortable gray areas. If it resonated with you, if you've been through something similar, I see you. And I hope you find your own way forward, whatever that looks like for you. Hit that like button if this story made you think. Subscribe if you want to hear more real stories about real people navigating impossible choices. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to be complicated, to make hard choices, to not have all the answers. And drop a comment telling me what you would have done.
I'm genuinely curious. Would you have opened the door? Would you have helped? Would you have made the same choices I did? Because here's the truth. There's no right answer. There's just the answer you can live with, and I'm learning to live with mine.